Imagine redrawing the map of the world. Like you sail into the absolute unknown, you survive freezing gales, violent clashes, uncharted reefs, all of it. And you officially discover Tasmania, New Zealand, and Fiji. You forever alter humanity's understanding of the globe.
Which is an unimaginable feat.
Right. So you return home, expecting a parade, maybe a knighthood, or at least a monumental spot in the history books. And instead, your bosses look at your logs, they sigh, and they declare your entire voyage a total, unmitigated failure.
Yeah, it completely shatters the romantic illusion we have of exploration, doesn't it? Because we tend to view the mapping of the world as this noble scientific pursuit. Like it's all about human curiosity.
Yeah, the pursuit of knowledge.
Exactly. But the reality, especially in this era, is often much darker and honestly far more bureaucratic.
Which is exactly what we're getting into today. So welcome to the deep dive. For you listening, our mission today is to unravel the life, the staggering maritime achievements, and the ultimate disgrace of Abel Tasman. We are pulling from a truly fascinating stack of sources for this one. We've got historical biographies, original ship logs from the Dutch East India Company, geographical records, and some really deep analyses of 17th century cartography.
And if there is one overarching theme to take away from all these sources, it is how ambition, corporate profit chasing, and literal fairy tales just collided to push the boundaries of the known world.
Yeah.
I mean, Tasman wasn't an academic geographer. He was a corporate employee trying to hit a quota.
Yeah, a guy just trying to do his job. And to understand how a man redraws the map, we need to look at where he started. Because, reading through his biography, he doesn't come from navigation royalty. It's not like he grew up studying astrolabes in a Venetian palace or something.
Oh, far from it. Tasman was born around 1603 in Lichegast, which is this tiny rural village in the northern Dutch province of Groningen. He came from a working-class Frisian background.
Right, and Frisian meaning exactly in the context of the 1600s.
Well, culturally and geographically, the Frisian region was really defined by its harsh environment. We are talking about coastal mudflats, peat bogs, and just a constant existential battle against the North Sea.
Oh, wow. So tough living.
Extremely.
Yeah.
It bred a very specific kind of hardy, pragmatic people. It was definitely not a launching pad for global elites. But Tasman possessed one incredibly rare, crucial tool. He was literate.
Which feels like a minor detail to us today, but back then, that's a massive separator.
Oh, it was the ultimate barrier to entry. We don't have the exact records of how a working-class kid from the peat bogs got formal schooling, but his ability to read, write, and importantly, process mathematical logs, that was the key that unlocked his upward mobility. So by 1631, the sources show him living in Amsterdam. He's a young widower, he marries his second wife, Jeannetje Jeyers, and he starts climbing the socioeconomic ladder.
Right.
And then 1633, he makes the pivotal decision of his life. He joins the VOC, the Dutch East India Company.
Okay, let's unpack this, because calling the VOC a shipping company is the understatement of the century. Reading through these historical logs, the best analogy I can think of is a ruthless, early modern tech monopoly. But instead of controlling data, they controlled nutmeg, cloves, and pepper.
Yeah.
And they pushed their employees into these high-risk, high-reward scenarios where basically survival meant promotion.
That's a great way to put it. They were effectively a sovereign state wrapped in a corporate charter. The VOC had their own private armies. They minted their own currency. They could literally declare war.
That's just wild for a company. And Tasman thrives in this meat grinder. He goes from common sailor to skipper in an astonishingly short time. But the sources detail an event in 1634 that really shows the kind of corporate enforcer he had to be. He's on an expedition to Seram Island, which is in modern-day Indonesia.
Yeah, this is where the sheer brutality of the VOC's business model comes into focus. The VOC did not believe in the free market at all. They enforced a strict, violent monopoly on spice trading. But the local people on Seram Island, they had been trading with non-Dutch Europeans.
Which, makes total sense from the locals' perspective. The VOC probably offered terrible fixed prices, so the locals looked for better buyers.
Of course. But to the VOC, that was theft of company property.
Yeah.
So Tasman is part of a fleet sent to enforce the monopoly, which usually meant burning unauthorized spice trees and literally starving populations into submission.
Brutal.
Very. And during this operation, Tasman's ship gets separated. A skirmish breaks out with the desperate locals, and things devolve into absolute chaos. At least 2 of Tasman's crew are killed.
And yet, reading the records, this violent disaster is actually what puts Tasman on the map with upper management. How does losing men in a chaotic skirmish lead to a promotion?
It's all about because of how he handled the aftermath. He didn't panic, he didn't abandon the mission, and crucially, he meticulously documented the event and reestablished control of his remaining crew.
Ah, so he did the paperwork.
Exactly. In the eyes of the corporate bosses back in Batavia, which is modern-day Jakarta, surviving that kind of unpredictable, violent situation and maintaining company protocol proves you are management material. You can be trusted with company assets out in the wild.
And that trust translates into his first major exploratory assignments. But this is the part of the deep dive that completely blew my mind. When we think of R&D today, research and development, we think of science and data. But Tasman's early exploration missions were driven entirely by literal myths.
Yeah, it shows just how murky 17th century geography really was. Like in 1639, they sent him into the North Pacific to find the Rica de Oro and Rica de Plata.
The gold and silver islands.
Right. These were legendary islands, allegedly made entirely of gold and silver, rumored to be floating somewhere east of Japan.
I have to ask, did the VOC leadership actually believe in solid gold islands, or was this just like a speculative, let's see what's out there venture?
No, they absolutely believed it was a statistical probability. The Spanish had found unimaginable wealth in the Americas, right? So the Dutch assumed the Pacific had to hold something similar.
That makes sense in a weird way.
Tasman found no gold, obviously. But spending months navigating poorly charted, highly dangerous waters gave him this unparalleled education in deep ocean survival. And that set the stage for 1642.
Which is the big one. Anthony Van Diemen, the fiercely ambitious Governor General of the VOC, gives Tasman the ultimate blank check. He commissions him to find the great unknown southern continent, Terra Australis.
And the theory of Terra Australis was based entirely on a philosophical belief in global symmetry.
Wait, really? Philosophy?
Yeah. European scholars looked at a globe and saw massive land masses in the northern hemisphere, Europe, Asia, North America. They assumed that if there wasn't an equally massive, dense continent at the bottom of the globe, the Earth would literally lose its balance and tip over in space.
It's incredible to think that entire armadas were launched based on the fear of a top-heavy planet.
Geography was as much philosophy as it was science back then. But Van Diemen wasn't just interested in philosophy, he wanted profit. He specifically ordered Tasman to locate the provinces of beach.
The provinces of beach. Okay, I saw this in the cartography records, and the origin of this place is hilarious. It's essentially a massive continent-sized typo, isn't it?
The catastrophic mistranslation, yes. So centuries earlier, Marco Polo dictated his travels, describing a wealthy kingdom called Locac. As his manuscripts were copied by hand over generations, Locac was misread as Boch, which then just morphed into beach. Map makers literally etched this phantom gold-rich kingdom of beach into their maps of the Southern Ocean as gospel truth.
So the VOC gives Tasman 2 ships to go find a typo. Let's talk about these ships, because they highlight the Dutch engineering genius. He has the Himsterk, which is a heavily armed warship, and the Zeehan, which the logs describe as a cargo fluid. What makes a fluid so special?
The fluid was really the secret weapon of the Dutch Golden Age. It was a brilliantly designed cargo vessel. It had a pear-shaped hull, so a narrow deck that bulged out dramatically underwater. And this was actually a massive tax evasion scheme.
Wait, a tax evasion scheme built into the ship's design?
Yes, because toll collectors in the Baltic Sea taxed ships based on the square footage of their main deck.
Oh, that is brilliant. A tiny deck on top, massive cargo space below.
Exactly, and it could be sailed by a surprisingly small crew. So Tasman has this perfect combination of a warship for defense and a fleet to carry all the anticipated gold. But his navigational strategy to reach this mysterious eastern landmass is where the story gets really wild.
Yeah, it completely defies logic at first glance. Wait, so to explore the east, they deliberately sailed thousands of miles west to Mauritius just to catch the wind. That's like flying from New York to LA by way of London.
It sounds totally absurd until you dig into the mechanics of 17th century oceanic travel. You couldn't just point a wooden ship at a destination and go. You were entirely a slave to the wind.
Right.
So Tasman's chief pilot, Franz Vischer, devised this terrifying but brilliant plan. By sailing west to Mauritius, they could drop straight south into an oceanic engine known as the Roaring Forties.
The Roaring Forties. The name alone sounds like an absolute nightmare.
It is a band of relentless, powerful westerly winds found between the 40th and 50th parallels in the southern hemisphere. And because there are virtually no land masses at those latitudes to break the wind, the gales just howl continuously around the globe, gathering immense speed.
So Vischer's plan is to deliberately sail into this violent wind tunnel and just let it slingshot them across the bottom of the planet to see what they bump into.
That is the exact strategy. You strap your wooden ships into a jet stream of freezing, turbulent gales, and you just pray you don't hit a reef in the dark.
And the craziest part is the slingshot actually works. It throws them violently into the exact uncharted territories Van Diemen wanted, but the reality they found wasn't exactly the golden paradise of beach. So on November 24th, 1642, the lookout spots high, mountainous land. Tasman names it Anthony Van Diemen's Land,
Which we know today as Tasmania. The name was changed much later by the British to distance the island from its brutal reputation as a penal colony.
just claiming this land was a physical ordeal. I mean, the logs from their landing at what is now Blackman's Bay are intense. The surf was crashing so violently against the rocks that they couldn't even risk bringing a rowboat to the shore.
Right, it was too dangerous.
So the ship's carpenter, Peter Jacobs, literally strips down, ties the heavy Dutch flag and pole to his back, and swims through the freezing, churning surf. He drags himself onto the beach just to plant the pole in the sand.
It's a really striking image of the sheer physical toll of exploration. And the environment was deeply unsettling for them. They found signs of life, like they saw smoke rising from the forests, and they found trees with massive notches cut into the bark, spaced really far apart.
Which we now know were cut by the indigenous Palawa people to climb the trees and hunt possums.
Yeah, but the Dutch couldn't figure out the spacing of the notches. They concluded that whoever lived there must be giants.
Giants.
Yeah. They never actually came face-to-face with the Palawa people during this visit. It was just this eerie phantom encounter.
So they pull up the flag. Well, actually, they leave the flag, pull up the anchor, and the Roaring Forties push them further east. And on December 13th, 1642, they sight land again. They become the first Europeans to lay eyes on New Zealand.
And Tasman gives it the name Statland.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Tasman bumps into New Zealand and assumes he's hit a continent that stretches all the way to Argentina. It shows just how little they actually knew about the globe at this point.
It's true. Explorers always filter reality through their existing biases. He was sent out to find a gargantuan globe-balancing continent. So the moment he saw a massive mountain range in New Zealand, his brain just filled in the thousands of miles of blank map between there and South America.
But the geography quickly takes a backseat to a human tragedy. They anchor in what is now Golden Bay, and they finally make contact with an indigenous population. Maori warriors in large canoes, called waka, paddle out toward the Dutch ships.
And this triggers a catastrophic cultural misunderstanding. The Maori approach and begin blowing on shell horns.
Yeah, I read the breakdowns of this encounter. In Maori protocol, blowing the horn is a challenge. It's a way of asking, who are you, what are your intentions, and are you prepared to fight?
Right. But the Dutch filter this through a European lens. In their maritime tradition, blowing a trumpet was a friendly musical greeting, a way to announce an ambassador. So, trying to be polite, the Dutch sailors grab their own trumpets and play a tune back to the Maori.
Which, to the Maori, essentially translates to, we are hostile and we accept your challenge.
It guaranteed violence. The next morning, a Maori waka rams one of the small Dutch transport boats that was ferrying men between the Heemskerk and the Zeehan. In the brutal melee that follows, 4 Dutch sailors are bludgeoned to death. The Dutch retaliate with musket and cannon fire, killing 1 Maori man.
Just a completely tragic miscommunication.
Yeah. Tasman immediately names the location Moordenaars Bay, which means Murderer's Bay. He raises anchor and flees. He charts the coastline, but he never actually sets foot on the land he discovered.
So he manages to survive the Pacific. He maps Fiji and Tonga on the way up and navigates his way back to the VOC headquarters in Batavia. Now, if you are a map maker,
That is exactly how the VOC viewed it. Tasman brought back no gold, no silver, and no lucrative new spice routes. Still, Van Diemen gives him one more shot.
Right.
In 1644, Tasman is sent out with 3 ships, the Lemon, the Zemu, and the Brack. The goal is to see if there is a profitable shipping channel between New Guinea and this massive Southland he's been skirting around.
And he accomplishes a massive feat of mapping. He charts the Gulf of Carpentaria and thousands of miles of the northern and western Australian coast. He proves definitively that Australia is one massive landmass, not just a scattered chain of islands.
He does, but he makes a fatal navigational error. He sails right past the Torres Strait, assuming it is just a shallow, impassable bay.
Oh, man.
Yeah, if he had navigated that strait, he would have opened a highly lucrative direct shipping route to the Pacific.
And his reports back to the VOC are incredibly dismissive of the whole area.
They are steeped in a purely mercantile worldview. He reports that the land is barren of any precious metals or agricultural wealth. He encounters indigenous Australians and dismisses them as naked beach runners, noting that they had no interest in European trade goods.
Because they weren't participating in mercantilism.
Exactly. And because of that, Tasman deemed them and the entire continent totally useless to the company.
So the VOC literally just crosses Australia off their to-do list. They abandon exploration of the continent for the next 125 years until James Cook arrives. But they don't throw Tasman's data away, do they?
No. His geographical data is compiled into the incredibly accurate Tasman map, also known as the Bonaparte map, but the VOC locks it in a vault. They treat the map as a highly classified corporate secret to ensure the British and the Spanish can't use their trade routes.
Wow. And with exploration shut down, Tasman's career takes a very dark turn. He isn't an explorer anymore. He's forced back into the role of a VOC enforcer.
Yeah, he is promoted to the Council of Justice in Batavia, which is a highly prestigious administrative position. He is, for all intents and purposes, a high-ranking judge in the colonial capital.
Which makes what happens next so shocking. In 1648, he commands a fleet sent to the Philippines to intercept Spanish silver ships. And he suffers a massive self-inflicted fall from grace.
Right. While commanding this fleet, Tasman gets heavily intoxicated. 2 of his own sailors commit a relatively minor infraction, but instead of following VOC naval protocol or utilizing the very legal system he represents on the Council of Justice, Tasman flies into a drunken rage.
Just a total loss of control.
Completely. He attempts to have both sailors summarily hanged from the ship's rigging without a trial.
And one of the men narrowly survives when the rope slips or he is cut down at the last second. It's just an appalling abuse of power.
And it forces us to look at why the VOC reacted the way they did. You know, the VOC had no problem slaughtering indigenous populations on Searam Island to protect a nutmeg monopoly, but executing your own contracted European sailors without the proper paperwork.
That's where they draw the line.
Yeah, because that threatened the strict Roman-Dutch legal framework the VOC relied on to legitimize its global authority. You cannot have rogue middle managers destroying company assets without a tribunal.
So he is recalled to Batavia in 1649. He is put on trial, found guilty of tyrannical conduct, heavily fined, and officially suspended from command.
He's eventually reinstated a couple of years later, but his reputation never recovers. The great explorer of the Golden Age is permanently stained by his own brutal temper. He retires around 1653 and lives out his life as a wealthy merchant and landowner in Batavia, dying in 1659.
Looking at all these sources, his legacy is a massive paradox. I mean, historians call him the great non-circumnavigator. He literally sailed a massive circle entirely around the continent of Australia without ever realizing what was in the middle.
But in doing so, he shattered the myth of Terra Australis. He proved that the Earth didn't need a massive, dense continent to maintain its balance in the cosmos. His corporate bosses deemed him a financial failure, sure, but history remembers him as the man who pulled the curtain back on the Pacific map.
Which brings us to a final underlying reality of this entire deep dive. We focus so much on the men, the ships, the corporate greed of the VOC, and the maps they drew. But think about the invisible engine driving the entire narrative. The Roaring Forties.
Right, Tasman's entire place in history hinged on the mechanics of a specific band of wind.
If the global climate of the 17th century had been even slightly different, like if those winds had shifted a few degrees north or south, Franz Fischer's slingshot strategy would have completely failed.
The Heemskerk and the Zeehan might have been blown deep into the Antarctic ice, or they could have been marooned in the doldrums. They might never have sighted the mountains of Tasmania or the shores of Golden Bay.
And if that Dutch encounter hadn't happened, the entire timeline of European cartography, colonial expansion, and the ultimate tragic impact on the indigenous peoples of Australasia would have fundamentally changed.
It's an incredible way to look at the muddy waters of history.
It really makes you realize that redrawing the map of the world wasn't a clean scientific process. It was more like trying to assemble a puzzle in the pitch dark, where the violent, invisible currents of the air itself decided which pieces you were allowed to touch.
Absolutely.
Well, that's it for today. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us. We'll catch you next time.